we sit here on Wednesday, November 6th, and I got to be honest, we said goodbye yesterday, and we were talking about the election. We were talking about the United States of America and all the emotion and all the passion and all the tension in the air. I think a lot of people thought, yeah, there wouldn't be a resolution to this particular election until maybe the end of the week or even next week or even in 2 weeks. But we wake up on this Wednesday, November 6th, learning that Donald Trump will in fact be the 47th president of the United States. Now, before you get crazy, we're not going to break that all down. I told you, it's a very emotional topic. We wish it wasn't, but that's the way it is. That's the way politics have become, not just in this country, but all around the world. And so we don't have to be naive about all of that. But it is somewhat of a mixed martial arts story. And I will explain why if I need to. Of course, Donald Trump, long been a supporter of mixed martial arts, long been a supporter of the UFC. And we saw over the past year plus him showing up to a lot of UFC events, getting the grandiose entrance and whatnot. We've seen Dana White campaign on his behalf in 2016, in 2020, and for this particular election. And there he was last night at Mar-a-Lago after Donald Trump, comes out and has the victory speech and lets the world know that he is going to be the 47th president-elect come January. There's a couple of people who speak. It's President Trump. It's J.D. Vance, who's the vice president-elect. It's maybe one other person, and it's Dana White. Who would have thought? Like, honestly, who would have thought? Your allegiances aside, it's kind of wild. It's surreal that the president of the UFC, Dana White, is up there speaking in a moment like that. Like, it's one thing really to speak at the GOP convention. It's one thing to do interviews. It's one thing to campaign. But in that moment, the victory speech, that moment, Dana White, I mean, it feels like we're not that far away from him being a part of some cabinet. Like that he's gonna, is he gonna leave? Is this the route? It's a wild thing, and this is not me, editorializing. It's actually kind of wild. Not only that, throughout all the broadcasts last night, you're hearing people specifically credit Joe Rogan and his endorsement of Donald Trump and the fact that Kamala Harris didn't go on his show and all that stuff that happened over the past 2 weeks or so as being a major factor as to why so many young people and so many different kinds of people voted in favor of Donald Trump. These are two very important figures. Obviously, Rogan known for much more than just his work as a UFC commentator, but how about the UFC and how about mixed martial arts having that much of an impact? I have no doubt that Dana White's, campaigning and influence and popularity leads to people wanting to vote and be a fan of Donald Trump, and the same with Joe Rogan. And so it's a wild, wild thing. In case you missed it, here's the moment as Donald Trump, the brand new president-elect, not vice president-elect, president-elect, the 47th president soon to be of the United States of America, giving Dana White a shout out late last night, and then Dana White coming up to the stage to say a few words as well.
We also have a man, Dana White, who has done some job. He's a tough guy. So Dana started UFC. And came to me, do you mind if I use your... Nobody wanted to give him Marines because they said it's a rough sport, a little rough. And I helped him out a little bit, and I went, and they said, this is the roughest sport I've ever seen, but I began to like it, and he loved it, and nobody's done a better job in sports. And he's a very motivational kind of a guy, what he does. He gets these fighters, and they really go at it, and it's become one of the most successful sports enterprises anywhere at any time. It's doing so well. I'd like to ask Dana just to say a couple of words because people love to hear from him. Dana, please.
This is amazing right here. We haven't seen Dana this passionate in years. Look at this.
Nobody deserves this more than him, and nobody deserves this more than his family does. This is what happens when the machine comes after you. What you've seen over the last several years, this is what it looks like. Couldn't stop him. He keeps going forward. He doesn't quit. He's the most resilient, hard-working man I've ever met in my life. His family are incredible people. This is karma, ladies and gentlemen. He deserves this. They deserve it as a family. I want to thank some people real quick. I want to thank the Nelt Boys, Aiden Ross, Theo Vaughn, Bustin' with the Boys, and last but not least, the mighty and powerful Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And thank you, America. Thank you. Have a good night.
Train by day. I mean, this is remarkable stuff. You have to admit, it is. Who would have thought?
That is a piece of work.
A real piece of work. 10 or so years ago, Dana White up there as the brand new president of this country is giving a victory speech. It's a surreal thing. It's a wild thing, and there's a lot of connections. Not just Dana, not just Joe Rogan. Stephen Chung, who used to work in communications for the UFC, is one of the key members of the Trump team. He's his. I believe they call him his campaign spokesman. He works for him. He has worked for him for quite some time, 2016 and 2020 as well. Used to work for the UFC. So there's all kinds of ties, not to mention all the fighters who have weighed in on this particular topic. I have no real issue with all this. It is what it is. We've seen it for a very long time. I do think it's supremely interesting how Dana loves to, and he'll never admit this, and he says it about me. He loves to make himself and the people around him into the victim. This is when the machine comes after you. This is karma. This is this and that. Like, man, it was a victory. Take the victory lap. Thank everyone. Thank the podcasters. Thank the other hosts. Thank the people that you work with. Spare me the victim mentality. And I know people will be like, this is rich coming from Ariel. He makes himself out to be the victim all the time. I don't know what karma he's talking about. I don't know. There was an election one time, someone won. There was an election another time, another person won. It is what it is. And I hope, I truly, truly hope, because he goes on these podcasts now talking about how the media is dead and how journalism is dead and how podcasts are the future. And the only way you can get the truth is on podcasting. Like it's a thing that just started a year ago. Podcasts just started a year ago. He found this thing called a podcast and it just started a year ago. And this is the place where you can speak your truth. Podcasts have been around for 15, 20 years. What are we talking about? But apparently someone told him that podcasts are the place, the only place where you can get, your truth out. In any event, I've already weighed in on this subject. So just remember what I said a couple weeks ago. Here's my point. My point is, this is an incredible country. This is the place I always wanted to live. This is the place I used to dream of living when I was a kid. I wanted the American dream. I wanted to be an American sports broadcaster. I wanted to come live here and raise a family here and be a part of this country. And I only hope and pray that now that all of this is behind us, and I know this may be a very naive take on all of this, I hope and pray that some way, somehow, the United States of America can become more united, that we can move on, that we can be in a better place, that it can be all about red, white, and blue, not, what team you're on, red or blue. The division, the vitriol, the hatred, it would be so great if we can go back to how we were in the summer. In the summer when you're watching the Olympics, you see everyone rooting for America. You see everyone kind of push, they're rooting for the basketball team to win. There's no one saying, this, that. Can't we get to that point? Is it possible? Is that naive? I don't know. And I'm not suggesting that there was once a time where everyone was in favor of whomever the president was, or there was one single party, but it would be a lot more refreshing as a parent, as someone who's trying to teach his kids right and wrong and about what's to come and why you should be so proud to be an American, if there can be less division, less hatred, less vitriol, and more support for whomever the president is, whatever the party in power is, and we could go back to it being a little bit more boring. Again, I know it's naive. I know it's a very simplistic way of looking at things, but the last 8 years have been very intense, very tension-filled, very vitriolic at times. And I just hope with this new regime, we could get past that and hopefully maybe come together as one. I don't know. Should we sing Kumbaya? Should we do that?
Who, me?
I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying, Frank? I dreamed of living in this country, and I wanted to go back to, at least in my mind, the Camelot that I dreamed of.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good way of looking at it. And when you were referring to it earlier today, it was quite the positive message, and I'm glad that you brought it up.
Thanks. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate that. How surreal, though, to see Dana White up there, huh?
I still can't believe that happened.
It's crazy.
And the shout out to the podcasters is pretty fun.
The Nelk Boys getting a shout out.
Elk Boys, Aiden. Boys, you know?
Joe Rogan. Who was it? Bussin' with the
Yeah,
Boys.
Bussin' with the Boys. Shout out.
What'd you guys think when you see that?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's nuts.
We're so used to seeing Dana up at podiums, and like now he's put on the world stage for all to see. It's nuts.
I would argue, guys, that that's the most passion that we've seen at a Dana White on a dais, on a platform like that, at a press conference, if you will. I know it wasn't a traditional press conference. Since 2017, Mayweather-McGregor, second stop in Toronto. Do you remember this moment? This is Dana White in his true form.
What's up, Los Angeles? Ladies and gentlemen, the reigning, defending 155-pound champion of the UFC, the notorious Conor McGregor.
So yeah, that was LA. He did the same in Toronto as well. I mean, that was peak Dana White. And I would say yesterday, Tuesday, was not quite as intense as that, but pretty darn close. And look, that's why people love him. The passion, when he is invested, when he is all in, there is arguably no greater promoter or hype man in the world. When he's truly invested, when he cares, which he does on this topic, which he did Mayweather-McGregor. That was the first thing that I thought of when I saw him up there yesterday. It was vintage Dana White, was it not, Rick?
It felt like the passion, the energy was there, and I definitely had a flashback to the Notorious and him turning red and those moments.
And the raining. The raining is the best part of all that. Screaming raining and his face is beat red.
You just it immediate, like, seeing Dana White there is a bit of a shock, even though now I guess I've become more used to it, right? We see Trump coming to the UFC events. We know how close the relationship is. We've heard him speak at the Republican convention, and we know that there's this relationship there. But it is just jarring to still see the first person who speaks after Donald Trump in his victory speech is Dana White, is just still like kind of like jarring to me, because I've seen Dana White, you know, from the beginning of his time and getting into the UFC, and is now like this close to power of that level and magnitude. Still is bizarre, even though, again, I've seen it a few times now, but it still kind of like startles me to a certain degree.
Right, like he doesn't just have a relationship with the now president of the United States. Like, he is boys with him. Like, he was like one of the first people he wanted to go to speak and like give thanks and everything afterward.
What's the line, by the way, at me getting deported come January? I mean, what are we setting this at?
You're a citizen now, baby.
Yeah,
can I get deported as a citizen? How does that work?
I feel like you're good now.
Okay.
I feel like you're safe.
I mean, I survived 2016. Actually, there was a greater chance of me getting deported
first time
because I wasn't a citizen yet, right? So I think I'm good,
you're
right?
One of us. Now you're one of us.
But are Dana and Trump closer now? You know, he pulls some strings,
It's a great
calls in
point.
a favor.
Let's not put this. Why are we putting this?
I mean, it's
universe
it's
anyway?
just it's out there. It's the elephant in the room. Hamzat title shot check.
Helwani
Kamar
gone.
Usman title shot check.
It's tough.
Till back in the country.
I was going to say Darren
check.
Till comes back
Yeah.
to the UFC, check.
Masvidal back in the UFC check.
Masvidal coming back, yeah.
Helwani deported check.
Do we get a 310 walkout?
Oof.
Or 309 walkout? 309 walkout. My
Yeah,
fault.
you mean MSG, right?
Yeah.
I could see it.
Or was he using it as like a campaign strategy, like get the hype going?
No, because I mean, I think we might see it.
I think he does.
Place is going to go nuts.
It could be a victory lap tour. I don't think you see him as much, because he'll be way busier, but I don't
Yeah.
think you see him as much at these events.
Not
And-
inaugurated yet though. Like, what's it like now for the next 2.5 months? Is he just chilling, waiting to start the new job? Is it like, you know,
Okay,
you
I
get
wish-
the new
I wish I
job
knew
and
that.
then you get laid off?
How does that work? I have no
I
idea.
don't know. Is he
Maybe
just chilling
Pete
until
knows.
January 20th?
There is a transfer of power. This is
I know, but that doesn't
what
happen until
happens.
January.
Well, yes, but there are things that need to be done.
Does he start
he's
moving into the Lincoln
president-elect.
bedroom? Does like he start
No,
moving
no,
a couple
no,
things in?
no.
He's just like, "What's up, Joe?" Like,
He's
it's
not
about time
booting.
you get on out of here, brother.
He's not booting Biden yet, but yeah, he's got work to do. He's got to deliver on all the campaign promises.
I kind of hope he's at 309.
PT, you think
Well, no one else, huh?
I was just trying to
I don't know.
process it.
I mean,
I
it
was
would
just
be
trying to
kinda cool,
process it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
yeah.
You know what I was actually thinking
He's
of
done
in
it a
that
million
moment?
times. We might as well just do it one
You know
more
what I was
time.
thinking of in that moment? Is it awkward today when they're having like their morning meeting? Like Joe's like, "Man, you let me down. Or is he happy? You know, I don't know. I don't know what that
Joe B or
Joseph Benavidez I'm talking about. No, Joe.
Oh yeah, one of the nicest guys.
It's all very surreal. What are people saying about it in Ireland?
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Pete? You've been quiet.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't realize you were so
I stayed
upset.
up till 4 a.m. I stayed up till 4 a.m. Watching the election. I stopped getting messages in our group, so I just moved on. Singled out Frank. He knew nothing. I guess.
Who, me?
I guess the thing. I was watching it for what, like maybe 5 hours.
And where were you watching it,
to me was, I went from Prime, and then we don't have many options. We have CNBC or CNN, so I was kind of jumping between the three of them. In that 5 hours, not one mention of Hamzat Shemaev's visa status.
Yeah.
I mean, what was I staying up for? Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I thought that was one of the core principles he was running on. That's what I was told.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if there was an issue, we still don't know if there is an issue, but if there was an issue, feels like it's something that will get addressed relatively quickly. And I could see the comments now. This is not a commentary on this person winning or this person losing. You just have to admit, if you're a longtime fan of the sport, it's pretty wild. And that in itself is not really a commentary, good or bad, that he's up there. I don't think he ever thought that he would be up there in a scene like this if he's being honest. And so again, it's one thing to campaign on behalf, but to be in that moment, the victory speech moment is a remarkable thing.
Just think back to
also like the on these shows I was watching, the discourse about the Joe Rogan effect was everywhere. You know, like we can't one of the first things that Dana White said when he took the stage and he was doing the victory speech was like crediting Joe Rogan. Like it's crazy to me. You know, this sport that was struggling for so long, for the majority of time that we were covering it, has been struggling for a mainstream footing. And then that's as mainstream as you can be. The president of the United States, the president-elect, has just won this election, and there's Dana White, and he's referencing Joe Rogan. And throughout the whole day of the votes being counted, they're talking about a bro vote, I believe they were calling it, and people being swayed by Rogan. It's incredible, honestly. It's absolutely crazy, this subculture.
I was thinking back the same way, but not even necessarily in terms of like the mainstream acceptance, but it was not that long ago. We go back 10 years, and the UFC and MMA in general were fighting for legalization, and Dana White and Joe Rogan are on the front lines railing against politicians and people who are preventing this from happening. Imagine the power that they would have had if this was happening now. Like the alternative universe where they are the ones who are closer to power than any of these other politicians is kind of a wild, like blowing my brain out thought. Just where we've come from, where UFC, MMA, Dana White, Joe Rogan were to now is just insane. The journey is ridiculous.
Even the Joe Rogan thing where it was like, oh, the Fear Factor guy works for the UFC. Now it's arguably the most influential and powerful host, not just podcast host, period. Just so happens to also be a UFC color commentator.
Yeah. I mean, I was watching ABC or something last night, and one of the dudes was at Arizona State, I think it was, and it was like what Pete's saying. He was like, yeah, a lot of people are saying they're out for, abortion. A lot of people are saying they're out for border control, things like that. And he was like, but the most by far that people have said they're out here for is because they listened to the Joe Rogan, Donald Trump interview. And I'm like, UFC commentator Joe Rogan?
Yeah.
This is crazy.
So let's see how it all pans out. I think we can all share the sentiment that we just hope that it's a better time for all of us in the new year, and that the world can be a happier and safer place. Thanks for watching this video. Hey, before you go, do me a favor, hit that sub button, give us a thumbs up, hit the little bell thingy as well. Leave us a nice comment or two. We appreciate you all very much.